The first rule of surviving New York is simple. If a dangerous man tells you to walk away, you do it before he changes his mind. I should have listened to that rule at 8:47 on a Thursday night, standing beneath the amber glow of the chandelier at Blackwell Steakhouse with a tray balanced on one palm and a folded note hidden beneath a porcelain plate. Outside, rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Park Avenue into a watercolor blur of headlights and wet pavement. Inside, everything smelled like seared ribeye, expensive bourbon, and money I would never touch. My name is Emily Carter. I was 24 years old, living in a 4-floor walk-up in Queens with a radiator that screamed like it hated winter, and on most nights my biggest worry was whether my tips would cover rent and my next tuition payment. But that night, my hands were shaking for a very different reason. Table 9 had been strange from the second he sat down. He came in alone, no reservation, no small talk, dark wool coat damp from the rain, and the kind of stillness that made the whole room feel too loud around him. Men like him didn't fidget. They didn't glance at their phones every 10 seconds. They didn't try to impress anyone. They watched. They measured. They made you feel like they noticed things you wished they hadn't. He ordered a 16-ounce ribeye, medium rare, black coffee, no wine, no dessert menu, nothing extra. Just the steak. Just the coffee. Just a voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear it. And when I leaned in, I caught the clean scent of cedar and rain and something colder underneath, something controlled. I told myself he was just another wealthy Manhattan customer with a face too sharp to trust. Then I noticed the man in the gray coat near the bar. He hadn't touched his drink in 20 minutes. He wasn't watching the Knicks game over the fireplace screen like everyone else pretending not to eavesdrop. He was watching Table 9. More specifically, he was watching the man at Table 9. Once I saw that, I noticed the others. A broad-shouldered guy near the front window pretending to scroll on his phone. Another by the hallway to the restrooms, posture too straight, eyes too alert. The kind of men who tried to look casual and failed because their attention never softened. Maybe I would have ignored it. Maybe I would have gone on refilling water glasses and smiling through another shift. But 10 minutes before I brought out the steak, I stepped through the service station and caught the gray coat man reflected in the glass of the wine cabinet. His hand moved under his jacket. Just for a second. Just enough for me to see the matte black shape tucked at his side. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might actually faint right there between the dessert spoons and folded linen napkins. I should have told the manager. I should have called 911. I should have stayed out of it. Instead, I tore a corner off my order pad and wrote 6 words with the pen I kept clipped to my apron. The man in gray will move. It sounded ridiculous the second I wrote it. Vague. Useless. Insane. But I folded it anyway. By the time the ribeye was ready, my pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I carried the plate across the dining room, every step too loud inside my own head. The pianist near the lounge switched into something slow and elegant. Glassware chimed softly. Someone laughed near the back of the room. Ordinary sounds. Normal sounds. The kind that made me feel crazier for what I was about to do. I set the steak in front of him. My fingers slipped the folded note beneath the edge of the plate in one motion I hoped looked practiced. For one terrible second, I thought maybe he hadn't noticed. Then his hand stilled over the steak knife. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just still. He picked up the note with the same calm precision he'd used to fold his napkin. Opened it. Read it once. Then slowly lifted his eyes to mine. I have never been good at describing fear without making it sound melodramatic. But the truth is his gaze didn't feel loud or violent or wild. It felt focused. That was worse. Like a spotlight finding me in a dark theater. Like a lock turning. Who gave you this? He asked. His voice was quiet. Perfectly level. But the room around us changed anyway. I felt it before I understood it. The server near the hostess stand stopped moving. The man at the window touched his cuff. Somewhere behind me, the front door opened and closed, letting in a blade of cold air and rain. I swallowed and tried to keep my face steady. No one, I whispered. You need to leave. He looked at me for one more second, then beyond me, toward the bar, toward the gray coat, toward something only he could read. When he stood, the chair barely made a sound against the hardwood floor, but every nerve in my body went tight. He was taller than I expected, maybe 6'2", broad shoulders under black cashmere. Dark hair pushed back from a face too composed to be safe. Not handsome in a soft way. handsome like the edge of something expensive and sharp. He left one hand near the table, the other adjusting the cuff of his shirt as if this were the most ordinary moment in the world. "Emily Carter," he said, and my blood went cold because I had never told him my name. "You should have gone home before this shift started." My mouth parted. I don't know what I meant to say. I never got the chance. Because at that exact moment, the man in the gray coat turned toward us, and the stranger in front of me gave me a look that felt less like warning and more like possession. Then he said, very softly, "Stay close to me if you want to make it through the next 60 seconds. My legs moved before my mind did. That was the only reason I did not freeze right there beside table 9 with a cooling ribeye between us and my own name still ringing in my ears. Emily Carter. He had said it like he had owned it for years, like he had been carrying it in his pocket, waiting for the right moment to unfold it. I stepped closer because every instinct I had was suddenly fighting the same battle. Run, hide, deny everything. But the look in his eyes told me something simple and terrifying. If I ran now, I would run blind. If I stayed near him, at least one of us seemed to understand what was happening. The man in the gray coat shifted near the bar, and the stranger in front of me turned his body just enough to block part of my view. It was such a smooth movement that most people in the restaurant would have missed it. I did not. He was positioning himself between me and whatever danger I had stumbled into. That should have comforted me. It did not. "Who are you?" I whispered. My voice sounded thin, almost swallowed by the clink of silverware and the low piano drifting from the lounge. He did not answer right away. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat and laid a crisp $100 bill beside the untouched coffee cup. A tip for a meal he had barely started. A signal, maybe, or the kind of gesture men made when money had stopped meaning anything real. Then he looked at the note again, once, and folded it into a perfect square. "Someone taught you to notice details," he said. "That is rare. I am a waitress, not a spy. Tonight, that may be the same thing." The line should have sounded ridiculous. Somehow it did not. Somewhere near the kitchen doors, Marcus, our floor manager, called my name with forced brightness, asking for 2 refills at table 14. He was trying too hard to sound normal. That was when I realized he had seen the man stand. He had seen me still standing beside him. And like everyone else in the room, he had decided not to interrupt. The stranger glanced past my shoulder. "Do not look behind you." Naturally, I wanted to do exactly that. I clenched my tray harder instead. "Why do you know my name?" I asked. "Because I do not sit in public without knowing every person who can reach my table." The words landed harder than they should have. Not loud, not threatening, just factual. For the first time, I understood that his quiet was not gentleness. It was discipline. It was the kind of control that made everyone around him rearrange themselves without being told. The man in the gray coat touched his ear like he was listening to something. A second later, the broad-shouldered man by the window started moving too. Not fast. Not suspicious if you were not paying attention. But I was paying attention now. So was the stranger. "Walk with me," he said. "I am still on shift." Not anymore. He did not grab me. He did not need to. He simply started toward the hallway leading past the private dining rooms, and I found myself matching his pace with the empty tray pressed to my ribs. Every step felt unreal. The restaurant still glowed with candlelight and polished glass. Couples still leaned over their meals. A man in a navy suit still laughed into his bourbon like nothing in the world had changed. But I could feel it now, hidden beneath the music and conversation. A pulse. A tension. Like the room had become a stage, and only a handful of us knew the script had turned. We reached the hallway, and the air immediately felt cooler, quieter. Framed black and white photos lined the walls. Manhattan in the 50s. Yellow cabs. Brooklyn bridges. Men in hats who looked like they kept secrets for a living. He stopped near the locked wine room, and finally turned fully toward me. Up close, he was even more difficult to read. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones. Eyes that were not cold exactly, but distant in a way that made warmth feel expensive. "If you were trying to help me," he said, "tell me why." "Because I saw something bad about to happen." "That is not enough." It was for me. His gaze held mine. I hated that my heart was beating so hard, he could probably see it in my throat. "The man in gray has been watching you since you sat down," I said. "There is another one by the front window and one near the restrooms." I saw a weapon under one jacket in the reflection by the wine cabinet. I thought maybe I was wrong. Then I realized all three were watching only you. He listened without blinking, without interrupting, and somehow that made me more nervous than if he had started shouting. When I finished, he tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle he had not expected to find. "Why not tell your manager?" he asked. I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Because my manager panics when the espresso machine breaks." That almost changed his expression. Almost. Fair. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the hallway. Smooth. Deliberate. Not staff. The stranger looked past me once, then back to my face. "Listen carefully, Emily. In the next few minutes, you may hear things that make no sense. You may see people act like this is a normal Thursday night. It is not. Stay beside me. Do not answer questions unless I tell you to. And if anyone says my name before I do, remember it." My mouth went dry. "Your name?" He looked at me for one measured second, then extended his hand as though we were meeting at a charity dinner instead of hiding from something I could barely understand. "Vincent Hale," he said. The name hit the air like it belonged there, heavy and final. I stared at his hand, then at his face, and before I could decide whether to take it, a voice drifted from the mouth of the hallway, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Mr. Hale," the man in the gray coat said. "I was wondering how long it would take her to find you." Vincent did not take his hand back. He left it there between us for one suspended second, as if the introduction mattered even now, even with danger standing 20 feet away in a gray cashmere coat, and pretending this was a civilized conversation. I never got the chance to take it. The man at the end of the hallway smiled first. Not warmly, not naturally, just enough to show he enjoyed being the one to break the silence. He was older than I had guessed from across the dining room, maybe mid-40s, silver-threaded at the temples, expensive coat, polished shoes, the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you noticed how dead his eyes were. "You really should not hide in hallways, Vincent," he said. "It makes people nervous." Vincent lowered his hand slowly and turned just enough that I was no longer fully visible from the hallway entrance. The movement was subtle, but now I understood him better. Everything he did had purpose. Every inch. Every pause. "Then perhaps you should stop following me into restaurants, Daniel." The man smiled wider at that. Daniel. So they knew each other. Worse than that, they knew each other well enough to speak softly in the middle of whatever this was. I stood frozen beside Vincent, tray still clutched against my ribs, trying to breathe like a normal person and failing completely. Daniel's gaze slid to me for half a second, and the expression in his eyes changed in a way that made my skin go cold. Recognition. Not of my face exactly, but of my role in whatever game they were playing. "This is unfortunate," he said. The girl was not supposed to get involved. I hated how small the word girl made me feel. I hated more that he said it like I was a loose document someone had forgotten to shred. Vincent's voice stayed calm. "Then you should have chosen a cleaner room." Daniel gave a quiet laugh. Still dramatic. "New York has made you theatrical." "No." Disappointed. The word landed like a blade laid gently on linen. Daniel's expression tightened for the first time. Only slightly. Only enough for me to realize Vincent had hit exactly where he meant to. For one stretched out second, nobody moved. Then a server rounded the corner carrying 2 dessert plates, and nearly stumbled at the sight of all 3 of us blocking the hallway. Her eyes darted from Vincent to Daniel to me, then down to the floor. "Sorry," she mumbled, voice shaking, before hurrying past toward the dining room. Ordinary life brushed right against whatever nightmare I had stepped into, and kept walking. That was the strangest part. The pianist was still playing. Silverware still chimed against china. Someone somewhere was probably asking for extra horseradish. And here I was, pressed against a wall beneath framed photographs, listening to 2 men speak in tones so controlled they sounded almost polite. Daniel slipped one hand into his coat pocket. Not fast. Not careless. Vincent's body shifted instantly, and I felt his arm brush mine, a warning without words. Daniel noticed. His smile returned, smoother this time. "Relax," he said. "If I had come for a public spectacle, your evening would already look very different." He pulled out a folded white napkin. Nothing else. Then he unfolded it carefully and revealed a small silver key resting in the center. My stomach tightened. Vincent's gaze dropped to it, and for the first time since I had met him, something moved behind his eyes. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Recognition with teeth. Daniel watched him the way men watch fires they have started on purpose. I was told this might interest you, he said softly. Though I admit, I expected a stronger reaction. Vincent's voice went colder, flatter. Where did you get that? Daniel ignored the question and looked at me instead. You chose an observant messenger tonight. That is new for you. Vincent took one step forward, not enough to lunge, not enough to threaten in any obvious way, but enough to make the hallway feel smaller. Look at me when you answer. Daniel did, and the friendliness vanished completely. There it was then, the truth under the manners. Whatever lay between these men was not business dinner tension or some upper-class grudge. It was history, old enough to be buried, sharp enough to still cut. Daniel held up the key between two fingers. Even from where I stood, I could see it was old. Not a modern apartment key or a sleek car key. This was small, silver, worn along the edges, with an engraved number near the base. 12. Vincent stared at it like he had seen a ghost standing upright in a hallway at Blackwell Steakhouse. Impossible, he said. It was barely above a whisper, but I heard it. Daniel heard it too. That is what makes it valuable. Something clicked in my head then. Not a full answer, just a shape. This was bigger than a setup in a restaurant. Bigger than men in gray coats and hidden weapons. The note I had slipped under a dinner plate had opened a door that had already existed. I had not started this. I had walked into the center of it. Vincent slowly turned his head toward me, and there was something almost dangerous in the way his focus sharpened. Not at me, through me, as if my presence had connected two pieces he had not realized belonged together. Emily, he said, and hearing my name in his voice again made my pulse stumble. When you wrote that note, did anyone see you? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I thought back to the service station, the wine cabinet, the order pad in my hand, the blur of white aprons and polished glasses. I do not know, I admitted. Maybe. I was careful, but I do not know. Daniel nodded like that answer pleased him. That is the problem with ordinary people, Vincent. They never understand how visible they are. Before I could react, he reached into his inner pocket again and pulled out a photograph. He did not toss it. He simply held it where both of us could see. It was old, slightly bent at one corner, taken outdoors in summer light. A little girl stood beside a woman with light hair and a bright smile, both of them in front of what looked like a lakeside cabin. The girl could not have been older than 8. She wore a white sundress, one sock folded down, front tooth missing. My breath vanished, because the little girl in the photograph was me. And Vincent Hale was no longer looking at Daniel. He was staring at the picture like the world had just shifted under his feet. Now, Daniel said quietly, shall we stop pretending she is just a waitress? For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The hallway, the piano, the low candlelight spilling in from the dining room. All of it blurred at the edges while I stared at the photograph in Daniel's hand and felt the floor slide half an inch away from reality. I knew that dress. I knew that stupid white sundress with the crooked hem my mother had bought on clearance from a store in Albany because she said it looked like summer. I knew the missing front tooth because I had smiled that way in every picture for nearly a year. And the woman beside me, laughing toward whoever held the camera, was my mother. Not my memory of her. Not the faded version I had carried through years of grief and survival. Her, bright-eyed, alive, real. My fingers loosened on the tray so suddenly I almost dropped it. Where did you get that? I asked, and I hated how raw my voice sounded. Daniel did not answer me. He kept watching Vincent. You see the resemblance now, he said softly. I wondered if you would. Vincent took the photo from his hand with a speed so controlled it looked effortless. He studied it once. Then again, his face unreadable except for the faint tension in his jaw. I wanted to snatch it back. I wanted to run. I wanted the last 15 minutes of my life erased so badly it made my chest ache. You do not touch what belongs to me, Vincent said. Daniel actually smiled at that. Interesting choice of words. I'm not talking about the girl. My stomach turned anyway. Vincent glanced at me then, as if realizing too late how that had sounded. But whatever correction he might have made never came, because Daniel took one step backward toward the dining room entrance and adjusted his cuff with irritating calm. This is not the place, he said. And if I were you, I would be very careful about what she remembers next. Then he walked away. Just like that. No raised voice. No dramatic threat. He simply disappeared back into the golden hum of the restaurant, as if he had only stopped by to discuss wine. I stared after him, waiting for someone to stop him, for Vincent to call out, for security to appear, for reality to act like reality again. None of that happened. Vincent slipped the photograph into his coat and turned to me fully. We are leaving. It was not a suggestion. No, the word came out before I could stop it. His expression did not change, but something sharpened in his eyes. Emily. Do not Emily me. My hands were shaking now, and I did not care if he saw it. That was me. That was my mother. That man knew who I was before tonight. And apparently, so do you. So no, I am not just walking out the back door with a stranger who acts like ordering a steak while half the room watches him is a normal Thursday. For the first time since I met him, Vincent looked almost human. Not softer, not less dangerous, just tired in some deep, hidden place. I did not know who you were when I sat down at table 9, he said. I know more now than I did 20 minutes ago, and that is exactly why you cannot stay here. You expect me to trust that? No, the honesty hit harder than reassurance would have. I expect you to understand urgency. I laughed once, sharp and breathless. That is convenient for you. It is life-saving for you. We stood there in the narrow hallway with the soft glow of the dining room at one end and the locked wine room at the other, and I realized something that made everything worse. He was not trying to persuade me. Men like Vincent Hale did not waste time persuading people when the clock had already run out. He was giving me the courtesy of a choice he clearly did not believe I should have. Tell me what that picture means, I said. Tell me why he had it. Not here. You keep saying that. Because here is where other people are listening. I swallowed. The hallway suddenly felt too open, too visible. Every framed photograph looked like an eye. Every sound from the dining room felt staged. Somewhere a server laughed too loudly. Somewhere a glass shattered, and a busser muttered an apology. Life kept moving, bright and polished and expensive, while mine had just been split open with a bent old picture and a silver key marked 12. Vincent stepped closer, close enough that I could see a faint line of fatigue beneath his eyes, as though whatever Daniel had just shown him had dragged up more than surprise. Listen to me carefully, he said. His voice dropped so low I had to focus to catch every word. If Daniel Mercer is willing to show his hand in public, then this is no longer about intimidation. It means he wants you seen. It means he wants you scared. And if he wants that, then there is a reason. Daniel Mercer. The name settled into me like cold rain. Who is he? I asked. Vincent held my gaze for one measured second. A man from a part of my life that should have stayed buried. That answer only made my pulse jump harder. And my mother? His eyes shifted just slightly. I do not know yet. Yet. He said it like a promise and a warning at the same time. Footsteps approached from the dining room again, brisk this time, and Marcus appeared around the corner with a forced smile stretched painfully across his face. Emily, he said too brightly. Table 6 is asking for their check, and there are 2 gentlemen at the front asking whether everything is all right back here. Vincent did not even look at him. Tell them she already left. Marcus blinked. Sir, I do not think. Vincent turned his head then, just enough for Marcus to see his face clearly. Whatever Marcus read there drained the color from him in seconds. Tell them, Vincent repeated, that Emily Carter left 10 minutes ago through the employee exit. Marcus nodded so fast it looked painful and backed away without another word. I stared after him. What did you do to him? Vincent's mouth flattened almost imperceptibly. Nothing. People reveal themselves when they are frightened enough. Before I could answer, the lights flickered once. Just once. But it was enough. The piano in the lounge cut off mid-note. A murmur rippled through the dining room. Vincent's head snapped toward the front of the restaurant. Every line of him going still in the most alarming way yet. Change of plans, he said. You are coming with me now. Then the emergency exit alarm began to ring somewhere near the kitchen, sharp and ugly and impossible to ignore, and Vincent reached for my hand like he had already decided I belonged on the other side of whatever came next. The alarm sliced through the restaurant like a crack in glass, high and shrill and wrong against the velvet hush of chandeliers and piano music that had already died mid-note. Every conversation in Blackwell's Steakhouse collapsed at once. Heads turned. Chairs scraped. Somewhere near the bar, a woman gasped and clutched her pearls like the noise itself had reached out and touched her. Vincent did not flinch. That was the part one noticed most. While the whole room shifted into confusion, he went still in that terrifying, disciplined way of his, as if chaos only made him more precise. His hand closed around mine before I could pull back, warm and firm and absolutely certain. Move, he said. I should have argued. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I followed him because the alarm kept screaming, the lights had flickered twice more, and every survival instinct I had was now pointing in the same direction. Not away from him. With him. We cut through the service corridor just as two cooks pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, both talking over each other in panicked bursts. One carried a dish towel over his shoulder, the other still wore plastic gloves dusted with flour. Neither of them noticed me. Both noticed Vincent. It happened in a blink. Their voices dropped. Their shoulders tightened. One of them stepped aside without being asked, eyes lowered like he had just recognized a force of nature and knew better than to stand in its path. The kitchen smelled like butter, garlic, and hot iron. Pans hissed under heat lamps. A row of finished plates sat abandoned on the pass, steaks cooling beneath perfect curls of rosemary butter while the emergency alarm kept shrieking overhead. I stumbled once on the rubber floor mat, and Vincent's grip tightened just enough to steady me without breaking stride. Do not look back, he said. That is becoming a habit with you. Then start giving me better nights. The answer slipped out before I could stop it. For half a second, I thought he might actually smile. Not because anything was funny. More like he had not expected me to have enough nerve left to answer him at all. You still have your tray, he said. I looked down and realized I was still clutching the stupid black serving tray against my side like it might somehow protect me. I dropped it beside a stack of clean mixing bowls, and the crack of plastic against tile made me jump. Vincent did not even look at it. Focus, Emily. I am trying. Try harder. We reached the back prep station where hanging ladles swayed slightly beneath the fluorescent lights. Marcus stood near the employee lockers with his phone in his hand and terror all over his face. He opened his mouth when he saw me, probably to say my name, maybe to apologize for whatever role he had already played in tonight's disaster, but Vincent cut him off with one look. Which door? He asked. Marcus swallowed. Loading dock is blocked. My stomach dropped. Vincent's expression did not change. By who? I do not know. 2 men. Maybe 3. They said there was a building issue and no one could use the rear lot. Vincent glanced at the ceiling like he was recalculating 10 moves at once. The alarm kept ringing. Somewhere behind us, a woman began complaining loudly about her coat. I could have laughed if I had not been so close to shaking apart. There is a cold storage corridor, Marcus said quickly, voice cracking. It leads to the alley behind the florist next door. Staff barely use it because the latch sticks in winter, but it should open from inside. Vincent nodded once. Show us. Marcus hesitated, just enough for me to see it. Just enough for Vincent to see it too. Now, Vincent said softly. Marcus moved. We followed him past walk-in coolers and shelves of dry goods stacked with canned tomatoes, imported olive oil, and boxes of linen-wrapped crackers. My sneakers squeaked against the tile. My pulse thudded in my throat. The deeper we went, the more the polished elegance of the dining room fell away until the whole world was concrete, fluorescent light, and the cold breath spilling from a half-open freezer door. Marcus stopped at the end of a narrow corridor where a gray metal exit door sat beside a mop bucket and a dented rack of chef coats. This one, he said. It sticks. Vincent released my hand only long enough to test the latch himself. The door moved maybe an inch, then stopped. Rain-wet air slipped through the crack, sharp and icy. Alley. Freedom. Maybe. Vincent shoved once harder, and the metal groaned. Again, he muttered to himself. Need help? I asked. He looked at me as though the question itself was absurd. Stand behind me. Marcus wiped his forehead with a shaking hand. I swear I did not know what this was. They asked questions about the staff schedule. About Emily. They said they were private investigators. I thought maybe there had been an incident with a customer or something. I swear to God, I did not know. Vincent turned so slowly that Marcus actually stepped back. They asked about her before tonight. My skin went cold all over again. Marcus nodded too fast. Twice this week. I did not tell them much. Just that she usually works Thursdays and Saturdays. I did not think. No. Vincent said, voice flat as winter glass. You did not. Marcus looked like he might be sick. I stared at him, my mind trying to catch up. They had been asking about me before tonight. Before the note. Before the steak. Before I ever noticed the man in the gray coat watching table 9. This was not random. This was not bad timing. Someone had arranged for me to be here. Vincent looked back at me then, and there was nothing soft in his face, only certainty. You understand now, he said. It was not cruel. That somehow made it worse. I swallowed hard. The photograph. Yes. Daniel knew I worked tonight. Yes. And you think this has something to do with my mother? Vincent pushed the door again, harder this time, and it jerked open another 2 inches with a shriek of metal. Cold rain-scented air rushed in. He glanced through the gap into darkness, then back at me. I think, he said carefully, that your mother was never as far from my world as you were told. The words hit like cold water down my spine. Before I could ask what he meant, footsteps sounded behind us in the corridor. Slow. Measured. Not kitchen staff. Not panicked. Approaching. Vincent's entire body sharpened. Marcus went pale. The footsteps stopped just out of view beyond the corner, and then Daniel Mercer's voice drifted down the fluorescent hallway as smooth and polished as if he were requesting a fresh bottle of wine. Vincent, he called, if you take her through that door, you will never find out why her mother kept the key. The hallway went silent after Daniel spoke, except for the alarm still shrieking through the building like a nerve that had been struck and would not stop vibrating. I stared at the thin crack of cold night visible through the metal door and felt my whole life split into 2 impossible choices. Outside was rain, darkness, and whatever waited beyond Blackwell's back alley. Behind us was Daniel Mercer, a photograph from my childhood, and the first real proof that my mother had been hiding something from me long before she died. Vincent did not turn around immediately. He kept one hand on the door, the other slightly raised at his side, every line of him controlled and alert. You talk too much, Daniel, he said at last. Only when truth becomes expensive. Daniel's voice came closer, though I still could not see him beyond the corner. If you leave now, she stays ignorant. Perhaps that is kinder, but I never took you for kind. Vincent finally looked at me. There was no panic in his face, only calculation layered over something darker. A decision being made in real time. Did your mother ever mention a place called Bellmere? He asked. The question hit so strangely I almost missed the name. Bellmere. It brushed something in the back of my memory. Not a clear memory. More like a sound heard through walls. No, I said, then hesitated. Maybe. I do not know. What? Because if Daniel is using that key, then Bellmere matters. You expect me to know what that means. No, I expect you to remember later. Daniel gave a quiet laugh from around the corner. Still turning people into puzzles, Vincent. That was always your flaw. Marcus stood flattened against the wall beside the mop bucket, sweating through his dress shirt and looking like he wanted to disappear into the concrete. I barely noticed him anymore. My focus had narrowed to Vincent's face, the cold air slipping through the half-open door, and the awful certainty that whatever came next would decide more than tonight. You said my mother kept the key. I called out, voice tighter than I wanted. What key? What are you talking about? Daniel did not answer me. He never told you, did he? He said instead, speaking past me to Vincent. How noble. How predictable. Vincent shut the door halfway with a hard metallic shove and turned at last, placing himself squarely between me and the corridor. You want her attention, he said. You have it. Start talking. Daniel stepped into view then, hands empty, posture relaxed, gray coat immaculate even under the sick fluorescent kitchen light. Without the dining room around him, he looked less like a wealthy diner and more like what he really was. A man who wore manners the way other people wore armor. 12 years ago, Daniel said, a woman disappeared with something that did not belong to her. Not money, not jewelry, something far more troublesome. She ran before anyone understood what she had taken or who she planned to give it to. She changed names, moved cities, built herself a little American life, and for a while it almost worked. My pulse stumbled. 12 years ago. That was around the time my mother moved us upstate for 2 years before coming back downstate after her second marriage failed. I had been too young to question it then. You are lying, I said, but the words came out weak. Daniel's eyes flicked to me with something dangerously close to pity. I rarely lie when the truth is more useful. Vincent said nothing. He only watched Daniel the way a man watches a fuse burning towards something explosive. The key opens a deposit box, Daniel continued. Bellmere Station. Old private rail platform outside the city. The box has not been touched in more than a decade. We know that because no one but your mother could open it. My mouth went dry. My mother was a school secretary in Yonkers. Daniel smiled faintly. Among other things. Stop. The word broke out of me sharper than I intended. Stop talking about her like you knew her. I did know her. That landed like a slap. Not as well as Vincent did, of course, but well enough. I felt the corridor tilt. I turned to Vincent so fast it made me dizzy. What does that mean? He did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Daniel saw it too. Ah, he murmured. Almost pleased. So that part is still raw. Vincent's voice went flat. Choose your next sentence carefully. Why? Daniel spread his hands. She deserves the truth. Unless you would rather keep pretending her mother was just a frightened bystander who wandered into the wrong life by accident. I stared at Vincent and saw the smallest shift in his expression. Not guilt exactly. Worse. Memory. Something old and heavy moved behind his eyes. Something he had carried for years and never intended to set down. Emily, he said quietly. Your mother's name before Carter was Lillian Hart. The corridor went silent inside my head. My mother's name was Nora Carter. Nora Lynn Carter. It was on every school form, every doctor's office file, every Christmas card she ever signed. No, I whispered. No, that is not true. It is. Vincent's voice did not rise. Nora Carter was the name she used after she disappeared. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the edge of a steel prep shelf just to stay upright. Somewhere behind us, the alarm finally cut off, and the sudden silence felt even worse. I could hear the hum of refrigeration units, the drip of rain through the half-open door, Marcus breathing too fast by the wall. How do you know that? I asked. Vincent held my gaze. Because before she vanished, she worked for my family. Family. Not company. Not business. Family. Daniel took one slow step closer. Tell her the rest. Vincent ignored him. She was not supposed to be involved in anything dangerous. She handled schedules, accounts, deliveries. Quiet work. Trusted work. And, I whispered. And one night, she took something and disappeared. The words felt too clean, too neat, for the wreck they caused inside me. Why? I asked. Because she was trying to save someone, Vincent said. Daniel's smile faded. Or because she was betraying someone. Perspective matters. I looked between them, between the man who terrified me and the man who unsettled me in a completely different way, and realized they were fighting over the shape of my mother's memory like she was still a contested territory. Save who? I asked. Vincent did not answer right away. His eyes dropped for half a second, just enough for me to know I was not going to like it. Me, he said. And before I could even begin to process that, voices erupted from. Deeper in the kitchen, footsteps rushed toward the corridor, and one of Vincent's men appeared around the corner soaked from rain, breathing hard, saying only 4 words that made Vincent's face turn to stone. They found the alley too. The words hit the corridor harder than the alarm had. They found the alley too. Vincent's man stood in the doorway breathing rain and urgency, dark hair damp against his forehead, black suit jacket clinging to his shoulders like he had run through half the storm to get here. I did not know his name, but he looked at Vincent the way everyone else did, waiting for orders before his next breath. Vincent did not waste a second. How many? He asked. At least 4 outside. 2 vehicles. More on the street. Daniel leaned lightly against the wall as if this were all mildly disappointing rather than catastrophic. You see? I tried to offer you a conversation. Vincent ignored him. That was becoming a pattern, and I was beginning to understand why. Some men only became more powerful when you answered them. Front of house. Vincent asked. Busy. Confused. A lot of civilians still inside. The man's gaze flicked toward me, then away. Not curious. Protective. Or maybe assessing. And Luca? Vincent asked, holding the dining room calm. Telling everyone it is an electrical issue. Of course he was. Somewhere beyond the kitchen walls, expensive people were probably being reassured that the interruption to their dinner was temporary, that dessert would still arrive, that New York could still be polished into something safe if enough money stood between you and the truth. Vincent made his decision the way he did everything else. Quietly. Completely. We do not use the alley, he said. We go up. Daniel's brows lifted. Creative. Predictable is what you were counting on. Vincent took my wrist then, not painfully, but firmly enough that I knew argument would be a waste of air. Come with me. I planted my feet anyway. No, his eyes snapped to mine. Emily, you keep saying things like that explains anything. My voice shook, but I did not care anymore. My mother lied about her name. She worked for your family. She stole something. She was trying to save you. And now men are asking about my shifts before I even write a note at dinner. I am done being dragged from hallway to hallway like luggage. Tell me what is happening. Daniel watched with open interest, like a man settling in for theater. Vincent's man looked anywhere but at me. Marcus had gone so quiet, I almost forgot he was still pressed against the wall by the mop bucket. Vincent stepped closer until the cold fluorescent light caught the rain still drying at the edge of his coat. What is happening? He said. Is that someone spent years waiting for a chance to reach something your mother hid, and tonight they decided that chance is you. I held his gaze even though my pulse was sprinting. Why would they think I know anything? Maybe because they believe blood remembers what the mind does not. Daniel smiled at that, small and infuriating. That was almost poetic, Vincent. Vincent did not even look at him. Or maybe because your mother left something meant for you, and they never found it. I swallowed hard. Did she? For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. I do not know. The honesty steadied me more than comfort would have. I took a slow breath that tasted like metal and cold storage air. Then I am not leaving until you tell me one thing clearly. Did you know my mother? Vincent went still. Not frozen. Braced. Daniel lowered his eyes like he already knew the answer and was enjoying the weight of it. Somewhere deeper in the kitchen, someone dropped a pan and cursed under their breath. The ordinary sound made the silence in our corridor feel even stranger. Yes, Vincent said at last. The word landed with brutal simplicity. How? His jaw tightened. When I was younger, she worked in one of our houses upstate during summers. Bellmere. She handled books, deliveries, staff rotations. She was trusted. Bellmere again. The name brushed my memory harder this time. A lake. White porch railings. A train whistle at night. A woman's hand pulling curtains closed. Fragments. Nothing solid. And you? I asked. Vincent's eyes held mine, unreadable except for the faintest edge of something like regret. I was there. Daniel let out a breath that could almost have been a laugh. That is one version of it. Vincent turned then, just enough to let a blade of cold into his voice. Another word. Daniel, and I will stop pretending this is still a conversation. Daniel lifted both hands in. Surrender so elegant it looked rehearsed. Very well. But if she starts remembering on her own, do not blame me for what comes next. Remembering. The word made my skin prickle. I had spent years with scattered, useless childhood fragments that never fit together properly. My mother standing at the stove in a borrowed kitchen. A silver key on a chain that I once tried to play with and got told never to touch. A man's voice in another room, deep and impatient, speaking too low for me to make out the words. I had always assumed memory was cruel because it left pieces and took the rest. Now I was not so sure. The key, I whispered. I have seen it before. Every face in the corridor changed. Vincent's first. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to know I had said something real. Daniel's smile thinned. Marcus blinked like he wished he were anywhere else on earth. Vincent's man shifted his stance, suddenly more alert. Where? Vincent asked. The question came fast. Too fast. I pressed my fingers to my temple, chasing a shape through fog. I do not know. Maybe in a drawer. Maybe on a chain. I was little. I remember my mother taking something off her neck before bedtime. Another fragment flashed. Her voice, urgent and softer than fear. If anything ever happens, you do not tell anyone what you saw. Emily. Vincent's voice pulled me back. Look at me. I did. Can you remember where? I shook my head, frustrated enough it hurt. No. It is like trying to catch smoke. Daniel pushed off the wall. Then we are done here. Vincent's man turned toward him instantly, but Vincent raised one hand without looking away from me. No, Vincent said softly. Now we are just beginning. His phone buzzed once inside his coat. He checked it, and the little remaining color drained from Marcus's face when Vincent read whatever was on the screen. What? I asked. Vincent slid the phone away. Luca just sent camera stills from the street. And his gaze locked on mine. A woman has been sitting in a black sedan across from your apartment since 6:05 this evening. My mouth went dry. What woman? We do not know yet. Daniel's expression changed then, only slightly, but enough for Vincent to catch it. Enough for me to catch Vincent catching it. You know her, Vincent said. This time it was not a guess. Daniel said nothing. Vincent's voice dropped lower. Colder. If she is here, then you came late. Daniel met his eyes for one suspended second. Or she came early. Before I could ask what that meant, the building lights flickered again, harder this time, and the service elevator at the end of the corridor chimed open with a cheerful ding so out of place it made my heart slam against my ribs. A woman stepped out in a cream wool coat, dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, posture straight as a blade. She looked no older than 35. Elegant, calm, familiar in a way that turned my blood to ice. Because even before she spoke, I knew I had seen her face before. Not in person. In old family albums my mother used to hide on the top shelf of her closet. The woman's eyes found mine, and whatever color had been left in Vincent's face vanished completely. "Emily," she said softly, as if she had every right to know my name. "You have your mother's eyes." For one suspended second, nobody in the corridor moved. The service elevator doors remained open behind her, reflecting harsh fluorescent light off brushed steel, and the whole world seemed to narrow to the woman in the cream coat, and the way Vincent Hale had gone completely still. Not angry, not startled. Worse, recognizing. The woman stepped out with measured elegance, one hand lightly resting against the strap of a dark leather handbag, as though she had arrived for a quiet dinner rather than walked into a corridor full of fear, secrets, and men who looked ready to break the night in half. I knew her face. I knew it with the same sick certainty I had felt when Daniel held up that old photograph. Not from real life. From an old album my mother used to keep wrapped in a blue scarf on the top shelf of her closet. There had been only a few pictures in it. Most of them had people with their heads turned or half smiles that felt unfinished, like the camera had caught them mid-thought. But one of them had shown this woman standing beside my mother on a train platform, both of them younger, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I had asked about her once when I was 10. My mother had taken the album from my lap and said only, "She is part of a life I left behind." Then she never showed me the picture again. "Who are you?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer mattered more than the name itself. Her eyes stayed on me. They were a deep, smoky blue, steady and intelligent, and far too calm for the room we were standing in. "My name is Evelyn Moretti," she said, "and I knew your mother better than almost anyone." Daniel let out a quiet breath that sounded suspiciously like annoyance. Vincent's gaze flicked to him, then back to her. "You should not be here, Evelyn." She finally looked at Vincent then, and whatever passed between them was older than the room, older than tonight, older maybe than my entire understanding of the world. "No," she said softly. "But neither should she." Her gaze returned to me on the last word, and something cold slid down my spine. Vincent moved a fraction closer to me. Not enough to touch, but enough that I felt the shift like a wall being built. "Say what you came to say," he told her. Quickly. Evelyn's expression did not change. "If I do, will you finally stop lying to the girl?" The corridor seemed to tighten around us. Marcus made a strangled sound from by the wall, and then pretended he had not. Vincent's man stood near the end of the hallway, shoulders squared, attention darting between Evelyn, Daniel, and the elevator as though he expected more ghosts to arrive at any second. I looked from one face to another and felt something inside me harden. I was tired of being handled like fragile evidence. "No one is going to talk around me anymore," I said. My voice shook, but not enough to lose the edge. Not about my mother. Not about me. Not about some key I apparently saw as a child and forgot because every adult in my life decided silence was a virtue. Daniel raised one brow, almost impressed. Vincent did not look away from Evelyn. "Then ask your question." "Fine." I had about 1,000. I picked the one that hurt most. Was my mother Nora Carter or Lillian Hart? Evelyn answered before anyone else could. "Both." I felt my throat tighten. "That is not an answer." "It is the only honest one," she said. "Lillian Hart was the woman she was before Bellmere. Nora Carter was the woman she became after she ran. Both were real. Neither got to stay." That silenced something in me for a second because it sounded too much like grief to be a prepared lie. "Why did she run?" I asked. Evelyn glanced at Vincent, and I saw it then. Not romance exactly. Not even tenderness. Something more dangerous. History that had cost both of them. "Because she found out what Bellmere was really being used for," Evelyn said. Daniel smiled thinly. "Careful." She ignored him. "And because once she found out, she realized there were only two ways to survive. Obey or disappear." My skin prickled. Used for what? Vincent's jaw tightened. Daniel's eyes cooled. Evelyn studied me for one long second, as if deciding whether I was strong enough for the truth. "Bellmere looked like a summer estate," she said. Lakeside house. Private rail access. Staff quarters. Gardens. Guests with perfect manners. On the surface, it was elegance. Behind that, it was a meeting point. Records were moved through there. Names. Accounts. Agreements that powerful men never wanted written down in the first place. I stared at her, my mind trying to fit my mother into that story and failing. My mother who made grilled cheese when I was sick and folded towels into perfect thirds and always double-checked the front lock before bed. My mother who flinched whenever an unknown number called after 9 o'clock. She was not one of them, I said. Evelyn's face softened, but only with sorrow. No, she was not. That is why she became dangerous. Vincent finally spoke, and his voice had gone low and rough in a way I had not heard before. That is enough. No, Evelyn said, and for the first time steel flashed through her calm. It is not enough. Not when Daniel is circling, and not when she has already been seen. Daniel sighed like a bored man at a lecture. You always did confuse urgency with sentiment. And you always confused loyalty with ownership. The silence after that line was sharp enough to cut. I turned to Vincent. What did my mother take? He looked at me then, truly looked, and the answer in his eyes arrived half a second. Before the words did. A ledger, he said. Not on paper. Encoded. Small enough to hide. Valuable enough to destroy lives. My breath caught. And the key? To the deposit box where she hid whatever she could not carry safely. Daniel finally pushed off the wall and straightened his coat cuffs. Part of it, he said. Not all of it. Evelyn's eyes snapped to him. Do not. He ignored her. Your mother was clever, Emily. Clever enough to divide what she took. Clever enough to trust no one fully. Not Vincent. Not me. Not even Evelyn, in the end. That made Evelyn go pale in a way that told me he had found the precise nerve to press. What does that mean? I asked. Daniel held my gaze. It means the ledger was separated into pieces. One hidden in Bellmere. One hidden elsewhere. And one piece, he said carefully, was never written down at all because your mother believed the safest place to keep it was inside the only person no one would think to search. The corridor went silent again. I felt every eye turn toward me before I even understood why. My heartbeat slowed into something strange and heavy. No, I said, but it came out as a whisper. Daniel did not blink. You were there that summer, Emily. A memory cracked open, so suddenly it made me dizzy. A woman kneeling in front of me. My mother's hands on my shoulders. Her voice urgent and shaking for the first and only time I can ever remember. If anyone asks, it is just a game. You are keeping something safe for Mommy. Do not say the words out loud. Not ever. No. I said again, louder now, because the shape of it was coming back and I did not want it. Vincent took one step toward me. Emily, do not. My palm hit the prep shelf behind me hard enough to sting. Fragments were rushing in now. Numbers disguised as a bedtime rhyme. A station clock. A silver key on a ribbon. My mother crying in the bathroom when she thought I was asleep. Evelyn's face changed first. Then Vincent's. He saw it. He saw that I was remembering. Daniel saw it too, and his mouth curved with quiet, terrible satisfaction. There it is, he murmured. That is why they kept you alive. The corridor tilted, then steadied. Then tilted again as if my body could not decide whether it wanted to stand or collapse. They kept you alive. Daniel's words hung in the fluorescent air with the quiet certainty of something planned long ago. I pressed harder against the steel shelf behind me, cold metal biting through my blouse, and fragments kept flashing faster now. My mother kneeling on the floor beside a narrow bed. A train whistle in the distance. Her hands cupping my face. A rhyme whispered twice, then again, until I could repeat it without thinking. Not for fun. Not to help me sleep. To bury something where no one would think to dig. Emily, Vincent said again, lower this time, like he was trying not to startle something wounded. I looked at him, and the strangest part was that his face had gone harder while his eyes had gone softer. Not gentle. He was not a gentle man. But there was restraint there, and something that looked too much like guilt for me to bear. Do you remember the words? Daniel asked. I flinched toward his voice before I could stop myself. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Do not answer him, Evelyn said sharply. Daniel smiled without warmth. Then perhaps you should answer her questions yourself, Evelyn. You always preferred half-truths when the full truth made you uncomfortable. Enough, Vincent said. It was only one word, but the entire corridor seemed to tighten around it. His man at the end of the hallway shifted closer to the elevator. Marcus stayed pressed to the wall, forgotten and gray-faced. Rain tapped faintly through the half-open exit door at the other end like knuckles against glass. I dragged in a breath that felt too thin. I remember a game, I whispered. The words came out before I meant to release them. Every face in front of me sharpened. My mother said it was a game. She told me if anyone asked, I had to smile and say it was just a game. My throat tightened around the memory. She said I was helping her keep something safe. Daniel took one step forward. Vincent moved at the exact same time, placing himself between us so smoothly it looked inevitable. Stop, Vincent said to him without turning. Daniel halted, but the satisfaction never left his eyes. You see, he murmured. We are finally getting somewhere. I hated him for that calm. I hated him for making my childhood sound like a strategy meeting. What was the rhyme? Vincent asked. His voice was steady now. Careful. Do you remember any of it? I closed my eyes because looking at all of them made the fragments scatter. Dark water. White porch railings. My mother brushing my hair by an open window. Her voice close to my ear. 12 steps east were the station size, I said, barely above a whisper, and the words fell out of me so naturally it felt like someone else had spoken them. My own pulse thundered in my ears. Under iron sleep where memory lies. I stopped, breath catching. The corridor had gone so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigeration units and the faint click of someone's cuff button when they shifted. When I opened my eyes, Daniel looked triumphant. Evelyn looked stricken. Vincent looked like a man watching the past claw its way back out of the ground. There is more, Daniel said softly. You know there is more. Do not do that, Evelyn snapped. She is remembering, not performing for you. I swallowed and pressed my fingers to my temple. The rest of it was there, just beyond reach, snagged on fear. I cannot. You can, Daniel said. Vincent turned his head slightly, and the look he gave Daniel was colder than anything I had seen all night. Speak again while she is trying to remember, he said, and I will remove you from this corridor myself. Daniel's jaw tightened. He said nothing. For the first time, I believed Vincent's quiet was not only discipline. It was mercy, carefully rationed. I forced myself to breathe slower. In, out. My mother used to make me do that when thunderstorms rolled in and the windows rattled. In, out. I saw her again then, not as the mother who packed my school lunches and checked my homework, but as the woman in that hidden photograph. Younger, more frightened, standing beside a train platform clock with one hand wrapped around a silver key on a ribbon around her neck. When the clock forgets the hour, I said, and my voice broke. Ask the lake what she swallowed. I blinked hard. No, that is not right. It is. Vincent was close enough now that I could feel the heat of him in the cold corridor, but he did not touch me. He only said, take your time. The words should not have mattered. They did. Because everyone else in this nightmare seemed to want something from my memory. He was the first one who sounded like he wanted me intact when I found it. I squeezed my eyes shut again. More pieces came. A little music box. A blue scarf. My mother's tears falling onto my hands while she smiled like she was trying to make fear look like love. Then it clicked. The lines settled into place with sickening clarity. Ask the lake what she hides, I whispered. Then trust the child with borrowed eyes. The second I said it, Daniel exhaled as if a long bet had just paid off. Evelyn went pale enough to look carved from marble. Vincent did not move at all. Borrowed eyes, Daniel repeated softly. There. That is the piece we were missing. I stared at him. What does that mean? He looked almost pleased to explain. It means your mother encoded the last access phrase to recognize not a name, but a witness. Someone who had seen Bellmere and would one day be old enough to return. Someone with her eyes in his. The corridor spun. I looked from Daniel to Vincent, and the silence that followed was so sharp it felt like stepping onto thin ice. No, I said, because I already understood what he was implying, and I could not let it become real. Vincent's expression did not change, but something flickered once, deep and hidden, like pain dragged under control by force. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, as if this was the moment she had hoped to delay. Daniel met my gaze and finished the sentence anyway. Emily, he said gently, almost kindly, which somehow made it crueler. Your mother did not choose you only because you were her daughter. She chose you because Bellmere would recognize your blood. For a moment, I could not hear anything. Not the hum of the coolers. Not the rain in the alley. Not Marcus trying not to breathe too loudly by the wall. Just that one sentence echoing through me like something dropped down a very deep well. Bellmere would recognize your blood. I stared at Daniel, then at Vincent, and the worst part was not the accusation itself. It was the silence that followed it. Silence can be an answer when truth is too ugly to speak out loud. No, I said again, but it sounded weaker now, dragged thin by memory and fear. No, that is not possible. Daniel tilted his head with infuriating patience. You have your mother's eyes, he said, and enough of his face that anyone who knew Bellmere would see it immediately. Vincent moved then, not toward Daniel, toward me, slow enough that I could have stepped back if I wanted to. I did not. I should have. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, cold metal shelf against my spine, because some part of me needed to hear whatever he was about to say, even if it ruined the last stable thing left in my life. Emily, he said quietly, look at me. I laughed once, sharp and breathless, and very close to breaking. That keeps getting harder. But I looked anyway. His face was still controlled, but the control had cost him something now. I could see it. In the tension at the corners of his mouth. In the way his eyes held mine without retreating. Daniel is using fragments as weapons, he said. Do not let him build the story for you. Then build it yourself, I shot back. Tell me I am wrong. He did not answer quickly enough. My stomach dropped so hard it hurt. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, as if she could not bear the sight of this exact moment finally arriving. Daniel watched us all with the quiet stillness of a man who had waited years to see a locked door open. Tell me, I said again, and this time my voice came out low and shaking. Was my mother trying to save you because you were important to her, or because you were my father? Vincent exhaled through his nose, once, controlled. I did not know, he said. Every person in that corridor seemed to still even further. What? The word barely made it out of my throat. I did not know, he repeated, and there was no defensiveness in it. Only something stripped down and brutally plain. Not then. Not afterward. Your mother disappeared before I understood the full reason for what she had done. My hands had gone numb. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have. Daniel made a soft sound of disbelief. Honesty. How noble you become when time does the confessing for you. Vincent ignored him. His eyes never left mine. I knew your mother mattered to me, he said. I knew she took something from Bellmere because she believed it would keep me alive. I knew she vanished before I could stop her or help her. I knew I spent years trying to find out whether she was safe. But no, Emily, I did not know about you. The words struck in strange places. Not relief exactly. Not comfort. But there was a difference between a lie and an absence, and I could hear the absence in him. It made everything more complicated, not less. Then why does Bellmere recognize my blood? I asked. This time it was Evelyn who answered. Because some of the old security measures were built around family, she said softly. Not public family. Internal lines. Contingencies. Names were not always used. Blood was simpler, harder to fake in those days. Those days, I repeated. You all keep talking like this was some old business disagreement. My mother hid parts of a ledger in a rail station and taught a child a code disguised as a bedtime rhyme. That is not a disagreement. That is a war people kept having after the rest of us went to sleep. Nobody corrected me. That told me enough. I pushed away from the shelf, suddenly needing to stand on my own feet, even if they were shaking. Fine, I said. Then here is what happens next. No more half answers. No more deciding what I can handle because it is convenient for any of you. If there is something at Bellmere or Bellmere Station or whatever that key opens, then I am going to know why my mother died protecting it. Daniel's expression sharpened. Careful. You are assuming she died because of it. The corridor went cold inside me. What? He looked almost amused by my confusion. Did Vincent never tell you the details of her death? I turned so fast toward Vincent that it made my head spin. What details? Vincent's jaw hardened. Evelyn stepped in before he could answer. Your mother's death was ruled an accident, she said. Single car crash. Winter roads. No sign of pursuit. No public investigation beyond the standard report. I stared at her. Ruled an accident, I repeated. You were saying it like it was not. Daniel slid one hand into his coat pocket and drew out a folded document, weathered at the edges. He did not offer it to me. He held it where I could see the top line. New York State Police Incident Supplement. Because it was not, he said. The report was amended before it disappeared. Vincent's voice turned to ice. Put that away. Daniel ignored him. There was a witness the state police never named. Someone saw another vehicle on the road that night. Someone saw your mother pull over before she ever reached the bridge. My heartbeat stuttered so hard it hurt. Who? I whispered. Daniel's gaze flicked deliberately to Vincent. That, he said softly, is where the story becomes truly interesting. Vincent took one step toward him, and the air in the corridor changed so fast it felt like pressure before a storm. His man at the elevator straightened. Marcus nearly slid down the wall. Evelyn's hand tightened on her bag strap. Daniel, infuriatingly calm, folded the document again and tucked it back into his coat. Bellmere, he said, as if he had not just set my whole world on fire. Or we continue performing this scene in a restaurant kitchen while everyone outside closes in. I could not tell whether I wanted to scream at him or thank him for finally giving me a direction. Vincent looked at me then, and something in his face had settled. Not peace. Decision. If we go, he said, you stay with me. No questions about that. Under any other circumstance, the command in his voice would have made me resist on principle alone. But the photograph, the rhyme, the key, the possibility that my mother's death had not been an accident, all of it had already stripped the night down to essentials. Safety, truth, survival. Maybe not in that order. I held his gaze and said the only thing I could. Then do not lie to me again. Something flickered behind his eyes. Brief. Unmistakable. I will not. The promise had barely left his mouth when the service elevator behind Evelyn chimed again, and a second set of doors across the kitchen slammed open at the same time. Vincent's man turned sharply toward the sound. Daniel cursed under his breath for the first time all night. Evelyn's composure cracked. And from somewhere just beyond the corridor, a woman's voice called out clear and cold over the clatter of the kitchen, using a name I had not heard in years but somehow knew belonged to my mother before she became my mother at all. Lillian, the voice said. If your daughter is here, then she already remembers too much. The name hit the corridor like a hand around my throat. Lillian. Not Nora. Not Mom. Lillian. The woman's voice had come from somewhere beyond the kitchen, clear and cold and certain, as if she had every right in the world to pull the dead back into the room just by speaking. Every muscle in my body locked. I did not understand how a stranger could say my mother's old name and make it sound less like memory and more like a door opening. Vincent's head turned first toward the sound, then toward me, and I saw it there again. That terrible mix of control and urgency that had become his entire language tonight. We move now, he said. Daniel did not argue this time. Whatever calculation had been unfolding behind his eyes all evening shifted in an instant. Agreed, he said, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The man who had spent the last hour detonating my life with carefully chosen truths was now suddenly practical. Evelyn turned toward the kitchen entrance, every inch of her gone hard and alert. She should not have found us this quickly. Who is she? I asked, and my voice came out thinner than I wanted. No one answered immediately. That scared me more than if they had lied. Vincent took my wrist again, firm and steady. Someone your mother feared. The words made the air leave my lungs. My mother had not feared much in ways a child could name. She was quiet, careful, watchful, yes. But fear had always lived under her skin in small behaviors, not in words. Triple-checking locks. Never using her real birthday on forms. Flinching when unfamiliar cars sat too long on our street. Hearing that someone had a name for the thing she feared made all those small habits feel like evidence. The woman's voice came again, closer now, drifting over the metallic clatter of the kitchen. If you keep hiding her, Vincent, you will repeat the same mistake twice. The hallway seemed to contract around us. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second, as though the sentence had landed exactly where it was meant to. Daniel muttered something low I could not catch. Vincent's grip on my wrist tightened, not painfully, just enough to remind me I was still here, still standing, still choosing breath over panic 1 second at a time. That is enough, he said. But he was speaking past me now, toward the unseen woman somewhere beyond the corridor. You lost the right to say her name years ago. Lost the right. The phrase landed like another puzzle piece I did not want. Evelyn spoke without looking at me. Her name is Adriana Vale. The name meant nothing to me and everything to the adults in the corridor. Daniel's shoulders went tight. Vincent's expression turned to stone. Even Marcus, who understood almost none of this, Looked like he had accidentally walked into church and heard the devil acknowledged out loud. "Who is Adriana Vale?" I asked. Evelyn turned to me then, and there was real sorrow in her face now. "She was the last person to see your mother before she disappeared from Bellmere." Before she disappeared, not before she died. The distinction was small and monstrous. "Why are you saying it like that?" I asked. Nobody answered quickly enough. Again, my heart was starting to hate silence. "Because," Daniel said, with far less satisfaction than usual, "the timeline of your mother's life was never as clean as you were told." My head snapped toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means," Evelyn said before he could keep talking, "that after Bellmere, there were gaps. Weeks, possibly months. Places we could not track. Names she used that never surfaced again. We assumed she was running. Running from what?" I demanded. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Vincent. He answered, "From everyone." It should have been impossible to feel more unsteady than I already did, but somehow that did it. My mother had always seemed so knowable in the ways children think mothers are knowable. Favorite tea. Right sock before left. Never liked thunderstorms unless she was indoors. But standing there in that fluorescent corridor with rain breathing through a half-open door and old names circling like knives, I realized I had known her only in the shape she had built after surviving something. Not the shape she had before. If Adriana was the last one to see her at Bellmere, I said slowly, then why is she here now? Why does she care about me? Vincent's voice went lower. Because if you remember the full phrase, Bellmere becomes accessible again. And I asked, and Adriana has spent 12 years making sure no one reaches what your mother hid before she does. There it was. Not money. Not sentiment. Not some tragic reunion. A race. I hated that my life could be reduced to leverage and access points and inherited risk, but I hated even more that it made sense. The service elevator dinged again behind Evelyn, the doors still standing open like a silver mouth. Vincent looked at his man. "Rooftop stairwell." "Clear for now," the man answered immediately. Daniel stepped aside, as if conceding the floor. "Up is still your best option." Vincent's gaze cut to him. "You are not coming." Daniel smiled faintly. "On the contrary, I am the only one here who knows whether Adriana brought backup from the street or the station." Vincent looked like he wanted to reject the idea on principle alone. Evelyn spoke first. "He is right." That surprised all of us, including Daniel. "I hate that he is right," she added, and for the first time all night, I almost believed her. Another sound rolled in from the kitchen then. Not shouting. Not panic. The sudden hush of people noticing someone powerful had entered the room. I had heard that hush before. Around Vincent. Around Daniel. It was becoming the soundtrack of my worst night. Adriana's voice came once more. Closer now, smooth as polished glass. "Emily." Hearing my own name from her mouth made my skin go cold. "Your mother asked me to protect you when the time came. You should ask yourself why Vincent never told you that." Every head in the corridor turned toward Vincent, including mine. He did not flinch, but something flashed across his face too quickly for me to read. Regret. Anger. Maybe both. "Is that true?" I asked. The words felt fragile and dangerous. He met my eyes, and for one suspended second the rest of the corridor fell away. No Daniel. No Evelyn. No elevator. Just the man who had ordered a steak and stepped into my life like a storm wearing good tailoring. "She asked many things of many people," he said. "That is not an answer." "No," he said softly. "It is not." The honesty hurt more than evasion would have. Before I could say anything else, Vincent's man pressed a hand to his earpiece and swore under his breath. "They are in the dining room," he said, "and she is not alone." Vincent stopped choosing between options. I could feel the exact second that happened. The air around him changed. Settled. Resolved. He took my hand fully this time, palm to palm, no room left for confusion. "Emily," he said, and his voice had gone quiet in the way that made everyone else obey. "You can hate me later. Right now, you stay with me." Something in me should have rebelled. Most of me did. But underneath the anger and grief and questions, another truth had taken shape, small and hard and impossible to ignore. He had not lied when he said staying near him improved my odds. And tonight, odds were all I had left. I looked him in the eye and said, "Then get me to Bellmere." For the first time since this nightmare began, something almost like surprise flickered in his face. Then he nodded once. "I was hoping you would say that." He turned toward the stairwell door at the far end of the corridor, just as Adriana Vale stepped into view at the kitchen entrance in a black cashmere coat, rain glistening on her shoulders, and when her gaze locked on mine, she smiled with the heartbreaking certainty of someone who had been waiting years to meet me. "There you are," she said. "Your mother made you much harder to find than she promised." Adriana Vale looked nothing like the kind of woman my mother would have described as dangerous. That was what made her so unsettling. She stood at the kitchen entrance with rain on her shoulders and perfect posture, and the sort of beauty that had learned years ago how to weaponize restraint. Dark hair pinned back, black cashmere coat falling in clean lines to her knees. No raised voice, no rush, just calm certainty and eyes that moved over me like she had already measured where I fit in a story I had only just discovered I belonged to. "Do not take another step," Vincent said. His voice was low, almost conversational, but every nerve in my body knew it for what it was. A warning. Adriana's smile did not disappear. "I am not here for a scene," she replied. "If I wanted one, your staff would already be screaming." I believed her. That was the worst part. People like Adriana did not need volume to prove they were dangerous. They only needed everyone else in the room to know it too. Vincent shifted half a step in front of me, not fully blocking my view, just enough to remind the entire corridor where he stood. Daniel watched from the wall with that infuriating stillness of his, though I noticed he had gone quieter since Adriana arrived. Even Evelyn, who had moved through this whole night, like someone trying to contain a fire with bare hands, looked tense now in a different way. More personal. Older. "You should not have come in person," Evelyn said. Adriana glanced at her with a softness that felt almost cruel. "And yet here we are." Then her eyes returned to me. "Emily, I know you have questions." I let out one short, unsteady laugh. That may be the understatement of the century. Something flickered in her expression then. Not amusement. Recognition, maybe. As if some part of me had reminded her of someone else. My mother, probably. The thought made my throat tighten. "Then ask one," Adriana said. "And let us see whether anyone in this corridor is finally prepared to answer you honestly." "You do not get to make that offer," Vincent said. "No." Adriana tilted her head slightly. "You made it years ago and failed spectacularly." Silence struck the room like flint. Vincent's jaw hardened. Daniel looked away for the first time all night. I felt the shift before I understood it. There were fractures here deeper than power or greed or whatever ledger everyone kept circling. There was history, hurt, choices that had calcified into blame. "Did you know my mother?" I asked. Adriana answered without hesitation. "Yes." "Did you protect her?" A pause this time. Very small, very revealing. "I tried to." Vincent's hand tightened once around mine. Adriana noticed. "Of course she did. That is the truth," she said quietly. "Whether he likes it or not." I looked at Vincent. "Is it?" He did not look at Adriana when he answered. He looked only at me. "She helped your mother leave Bellmere alive." The admission changed the air. Adriana's face remained composed, but something in her eyes darkened. "With memory." "Alive," she repeated softly. "Yes, that was the best any of us could do by then." My heart pounded harder. "Then why is everyone acting like you are the enemy?" Adriana smiled again, but there was no warmth in it now. "Because surviving the same night does not make people loyal in the same direction." Daniel exhaled through his nose like he was tired of poetry and wanted numbers. "We are wasting time." Adriana ignored him with the ease of someone long accustomed to being obeyed. "Emily," she said, "your mother divided that ledger because she stopped believing any one person deserved all of it. Not Vincent. Not Daniel. Not me. She believed the truth had become too dangerous to leave whole. So she turned her daughter into a hiding place." I snapped. Adriana did not flinch. "She turned her daughter into the one person no one would dare suspect until it was too late. That is not better." "No," she said softly. "It is not." The honesty hit harder than a polished excuse would have. I hated that. I hated all of them for sounding human at the exact moments I most wanted monsters. "Then tell me one thing clearly," I said. "Did my mother die because of the ledger?" No one spoke. Not Vincent. Not Evelyn. Not Daniel. Adriana was the one who finally answered, and when she did, her voice had lost its elegant distance. "Your mother died because she ran out of people she could trust," she said. The words landed so quietly they almost hurt more. I stared at her, and for a second I was 10 years old again, standing in our kitchen while my mother checked the front window for the third time before bed. Trust no one who arrives too calmly. She had once told me after I asked why she never answered the door without looking first. I had thought she was being dramatic. Now I wondered who had made calm seem more dangerous than shouting. You said she asked you to protect me, I said. Why did you wait until tonight? Adriana's eyes shifted, just slightly, to Vincent. Because he kept you hidden better than I expected. That startled me enough that I forgot to breathe for a second. Vincent had been looking for answers. Protecting me. Both could be true. The realization annoyed me almost as much as it steadied me. Do not romanticize this, Daniel said flatly. He kept her hidden because as long as she was ignorant, she was useful to everyone. Vincent turned toward him with a coldness that felt earned now. You are still speaking as though you leave this kitchen with influence. Adriana stepped forward then, just one measured pace, and every man in the corridor adjusted to it. Not because she threatened them, because her certainty did. Enough, she said. Bellmere is no longer the question. The station is. My pulse jumped. The deposit box. She nodded. If the phrase is returning to you, then the lock will respond. But only if you arrive before midnight. I frowned. Why before midnight? Evelyn answered this time, voice thin with old knowledge. Because the box is tied to the old rail schedule. 12. The engraved key was not only a number. It was a time marker. 12. Bellmere. The station size. The clock forgets the hour. The rhyme shifted again inside my head, rearranging itself around something almost clear. Adriana saw it happen. You remember more than you think, she said. Do not force it. Let the place bring it back. Vincent made his choice before anyone else could speak. We leave in 30 seconds. Together? Daniel asked. Vincent's expression turned glacial. No, not together. You will take the west exit and draw attention where I tell you. Daniel actually blinked. Adriana almost smiled. You are sending him out as bait. I am giving him a chance to be useful. Under different circumstances, I might have admired that line. Instead, I was too busy noticing how naturally Vincent had moved into command, how instinctively everyone else adapted, even the people who hated him. He turned to Evelyn. You come with us. Adriana's brows lifted. Interesting. I am done letting strangers define who gets near her, Vincent said. There was something in the way he said her that made my chest tighten for reasons I did not want to examine. Not ownership exactly. Responsibility. Chosen and absolute. Adriana studied him for one long second, then looked at me. Bellmere Station is where your mother expected truth to cost the most, she said. When you open that box, do not assume what you find was meant to save him. Her eyes flicked toward Vincent on the last word. Sometimes people hide things to expose love, not protect it. Before I could ask what that meant, Vincent drew me toward the stairwell door. His hand stayed wrapped around mine, steady and unshakable. Daniel moved the opposite direction with visible irritation. Evelyn followed close behind us. Adriana remained at the kitchen entrance, still as a portrait, watching me with an expression I could not read until the last second. Then I understood it. Not threat, not triumph, grief. Emily, she said just before Vincent opened the door. When you see what your mother left, remember this. She did not run from Bellmere alone. Vincent went still. So did Evelyn. I turned back, heart slamming against my ribs, but Adriana had already stepped aside into the kitchen shadows, and Vincent's voice came low beside my ear, rougher than I had heard it all night. Do not ask me that question until we are in the car. Rain hit my face the second Vincent shoved open the stairwell exit and pulled me into the night. Cold, sharp, immediate. The kind of rain that made Manhattan look blurred at the edges, as if the whole city wanted plausible deniability for what it sheltered after dark. We moved fast across the rooftop service landing, Vincent's hand locked around mine, Evelyn a step behind us, his man already at the corner scanning the alley below. Somewhere on the street, a horn blared. Somewhere farther off, a siren wailed and faded. Ordinary New York sounds. None of them felt ordinary anymore. My shoes slipped once on wet concrete, and Vincent steadied me without breaking stride. Car is on 48th, his man said into the storm. East side. 30 seconds if the lane stays clear. Vincent nodded once. Go. We hit the metal stairs hard, the city opening around us in flashes of neon, rain-slick brick, and fire escapes glistening like black ribs. My lungs burned by the second landing. My mind burned harder. She did not run from Bellmere alone. Adriana's words kept chasing me down every step. By the time we reached the alley, I had stopped trying to sort fear from anger. They were the same temperature now. A black sedan waited at the curb with its engine running, headlights low, windshield jeweled with rain. The rear door opened before we reached it. Vincent guided me inside first, then followed, pulling the door shut on the storm. The quiet in the car was immediate and expensive. Leather, heat, the faint scent of cedar and clean cologne. A world away from the kitchen corridor I had left less than 5 minutes earlier. Evelyn slid in across from us. Vincent's man took the front passenger seat. The driver pulled away before the doors had fully sealed the sound of the street. Bellmere Station, Vincent said. No direct route. Changed twice. Already doing it, the driver answered. I turned to Vincent the second the car moved. Now. He did not pretend not to know what I meant. Rain streaked across the tinted windows behind him, cutting the city into silver lines over his shoulder. He sat angled toward me, coat damp at the collar, dark hair touched by weather, face as controlled as ever except for one thing. Fatigue. Not physical. Something older. He had been running from this conversation longer than I had known he existed. Adriana was right, he said at last. Your mother did not leave Bellmere alone. My throat tightened. Who was with her? His gaze held mine. I was. Even after everything tonight, even after Daniel and Evelyn and Adriana had peeled my past apart layer by layer, that answer still struck like a live wire. I stared at him, waiting for the follow-up, the correction, the part that would make it less devastatingly simple. It never came. You left with her, I repeated. The city light slid over his face and disappeared again. Yes. Why? The question came out smaller than I wanted. He looked out the window for 1 second, then back at me. Because by then Bellmere was not a house anymore. It was a trap built to look like a home. Because your mother had found the ledger and understood what it meant. Because I had just learned what my family really used that place for. And I was stupid enough to think leaving with her would be enough to stop what came next. The confession was so plain it hurt. No drama. No excuses. Just ruin told quietly. Evelyn lowered her eyes, as if she had heard this version before and still wished she had not. How long? I asked. How long were you with her? Vincent's jaw tightened once. 3 weeks after we left Bellmere. We changed cars. We changed motels. We stayed nowhere long enough to become easy to find. She was trying to decide who could be trusted with the ledger and who had already been bought by it. And me? I whispered. Where was I? His expression shifted, just barely. With her. That made my heart stop for one terrible beat. I was there. Not at Bellmere the first night. She would not allow that. But afterward, yes. For part of it. Fragments flashed again. A motel lamp. My mother brushing rain off a man's coat sleeve. A deep voice reading road signs like they mattered. Green dashboard light across strong hands on a steering wheel. I had buried those memories under years of ordinary life until they became nothing more than a feeling that highways after dark were sadder than they should be. Then why do I not remember you? I asked. Vincent gave a humorless half-breath that almost became a laugh. Because children do not remember men who disappear before dawn unless someone teaches them to. Did my mother love you? The question slipped out before pride could stop it. Evelyn looked up sharply. The driver kept his eyes on the road. Vincent went completely still. I almost took it back. Almost. Then he answered. Yes. He did not dress it up. Did not soften it. Did not make it about himself. Just yes. My chest tightened so fast it felt like a bruise blooming under the skin. And you? I asked. His eyes met mine, dark and unguarded for the first time since table 9. I never stopped. No one in that car moved. Rain whispered over the roof. Tires hissed over wet pavement. Somewhere outside, the city kept pretending this was another Thursday night. Inside that sedan, my entire life rearranged itself around one impossible truth. My mother had not only worked for his family. She had fled with him. She had trusted him enough to run and distrusted the world enough to hide parts of the truth, even from him. And whatever had happened after those 3 weeks had left him carrying her name like a wound that never healed correctly. Then why did you let me believe she died alone? I asked. His face changed at that. Not anger. Pain. Bare and quick and ruthlessly contained. Because when we were separated, I thought I had gotten her killed. Because finding you living a quiet life meant there was one piece of her world I had not destroyed. Because the first time I saw your personnel file tonight and understood who you might be, I told myself I would protect you without ever making you pay for what came before. His voice dropped lower. Then you slipped me that note. I looked away because suddenly looking at him felt too intimate for a car full of witnesses. My pulse would not settle. Neither would the memories. What happened the night you were separated? I asked. He leaned back a fraction, but his gaze stayed on me. We were headed north. Your mother had the key. I had part of the ledger translated in my head, and enough names to know half the city would burn if the wrong people reached Bellmere station first. We stopped near the Hudson because she said we were being followed. She told me to take you and keep driving if anything happened. My breath caught. Did you? No, the word was flat with self-contempt. I argued. She locked you in the back seat and walked into the rain before I realized she was buying time, not asking permission. Evelyn shut her eyes. She already knew this part. Maybe she had always known. And then, I whispered. Vincent's fingers flexed once against his knee. And then another car came over the rise. By the time I got to the shoulder, she was gone, and you were crying in the back seat, and the road was empty in both directions, as if the storm itself had swallowed her. My throat burned. That is impossible. I know. So how did I end up with her again? His gaze sharpened. That is the question. The answer landed a second later, not from him, but from the front seat. His man turned halfway around, phone in hand, face gone tight. We have a problem. Vincent's expression sealed shut instantly. What? Camera ping from Bellmere station. He handed the phone back over the seat. On the screen, grainy and gray under midnight lighting, I saw an old platform, a clock, the outline of a locked gate, and one woman standing beneath it in a dark coat with her face tipped toward the camera like she knew exactly where to look. My heart slammed so hard it hurt because even in black and white, even blurred by rain and distance, I knew that face. I had seen it every morning for years in the mirror. The driver swore softly. Evelyn made a broken sound in the back of her throat. Vincent did not move at all. He only stared at the screen as if the world had finally done the one thing even he had not planned for. That cannot be, he said. But I was already leaning forward, staring at the image, shaking so hard my teeth nearly clicked together, because the woman waiting for us at Bellmere station looked exactly like my mother.